New analysis reveals the Defence Department's core funding is actually set to decline over the next 3 years. A report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute found the government's budget reduced the core funding by $1.5 billion. That's over forward estimates. ASPI notes a quite significant gap between the Defence Strategic Review's rhetoric and the actual budget allocated. Joining me now is Deputy Defence Director at ASPI, Jennifer Parker. Thanks for your time. Dumb it down for me. Core funding.
Well,
what are we talking about here?
Thanks for having me, Tom. So when we talk about core funding, defence funding in the portfolio budget statements is combined with ASDs. So when we're talking about core defence, we're saying the defence funding line minus ASD, the amount of money that is going to the Department of Defence.
Okay, so Signals Directorate stripping that bit out.
Yes.
Why is this a concern? We're talking about all these big new projects for defence, big new threats. You're saying no big new money, but is it a holding pattern budget? Are we going to see a couple of items really go into the forward estimates next budget and that's when it balloons?
Look, it's difficult to say. I think why it's a concern is, the DSR was released about 4 weeks before the budget and it really highlights our strategic situation. Okay, things are deteriorating and we need to accelerate capability within defence. So the budget released 4 weeks later, look, they didn't have a lot of time to analyse the DSR, so it is understandable that it's not reacting to the DSR in full.
Okay.
That said, though, when we talk about needing to accelerate capability, we talk about the fact that the budget forecast from 2022 for the next 3 years is actually $1.5 billion higher in last year's budget than it is for the next 3 years in this budget. Now, the government does provide $30.5 billion coming in just at the end of the forward estimate, so 26, 27, to start really accelerating capability. But ASPI's point is that's probably not early enough. So I think the next 12 months before we get into the National Defence Strategy that's going to be released in 2024, both government and defence need to do a lot of work to understand when they need the money, where the money's coming from, and bring that into the next 4-year period.
Right. So I guess that could happen at least the last 3 of those years. Why a concern? Why did you want to see it now? I mean, I guess what could they be addressing in the shortfall? Is it personnel? Because that's been dwindling. Is that something you could tip money into straight away?
Look, the recent budget has tipped an extra $400 million into personnel. That's the retention bonuses you've seen government announce. Look, ASPI's report doesn't find that there should have been money in this financial year, but it's concerning that the new money's not coming for another 4 years. So
unless the next budget suddenly drops money into these forward estimates, right? They can do that.
So absolutely they can do that, and we advocate that they should. But it's interesting that the growth in the defence funding that was talked about post the release of DSR in the medium term starts at 26, 27. So they have agreed it needs to grow. They've added $30.5 billion, but not until 26, 27.
The sceptic in me says, from all the stories I've read over the years around interestingly managed acquisitions and so on, that there's always fat to trim in defence. Is that an aspect here? Because I know they were spruiking the savings made. There's new money spent and savings made as well.
Yeah, so look, the DSR, post the DSR, the government highlighted that there'd be $19 billion towards the DSR in the forward estimates, of which would all be cost neutral, which is always a challenge. And about $7.3 billion of that was new money that needed to be found within defence, so they need to get offsets. Look, another finding in the DSR is that the capability acquisition space is an area that defence needs to focus on, and that's an area that's commonly criticised for allowing blowouts. And we saw, the ANAO audit of the Hunter class come out about 2 weeks ago. That project originally costed, I think, at about $30 billion, is now at about $45 billion and growing. So look, it is a common criticism of defence. I would say that military acquisition is obviously complex, but defence, I think government has made it clear, defence is going to have to find a lot of that money inside defence, which means you might see some key changes to key acquisition.
But I mean, within defence, I guess you're almost from the point of view of always arguing for more. Do you get why they do want to find savings, efficiencies, better run elements? Because it can't be limitless, right? And you've got to keep discipline within every department, including defence. Because if people just sort of say we can spend what we want, they will.
Yeah, look, I completely agree with you. And I think that's part of the messaging of not tipping extra money in the next 3 years. Right. I think we'll see that change with the National Defence Strategy.
Okay.
I do think there's also an element that nobody's quite sure how much that costs, because the DSR not only said, hey, you need these new capabilities, it said you need to reshape the Defence Force. So
in order to deliver them, run them, etc.
Exactly.
So is the point around this not necessarily we're facing a shortfall, but you thought there might be some more money in the forwards, you keep a close eye on it at the next budget, will that money actually start to flow?
I think it's kind of 2 points. The first one is it's concerning that the budget projections for the next 3 years from last year have dropped this year. But also the second point is really that the money coming in 26, 27 probably needs to come earlier to achieve what defence needs to achieve.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you'll have a close eye on the next budget.
Absolutely.
And Jennifer Parker, thank you.
Thanks so much, Tom.